Since Jason went to the live servers in DBD, I've witnessed a lot of players struggling against him, and I'm talking a lot of short chases, very bad gen pressure, just the whole shebang. While I've personally had some pretty fun and close chases against him, I can understand why some players have been struggling. And because of this, I've compiled a somewhat unorganized list of some tips and tricks when facing Jason, mostly just in hopes that it will help at least one Survivor player have a better time when playing against Jason. And like I said, this is kind of an unorganized list, and I didn't really feel like making a script for this video, so if I end up rambling, that's probably why. So the first issue I am seeing with a lot of players is the overuse of crouch walking. Now first of all, I should say that crouch walking is absolutely a very good strategy against Jason, but there's just times where you have to run and not be scared. The entire point of the omnipresent evil and jump scare mechanic is to encourage players to play at a slower pace, and if you constantly crouch walk, you're just giving Jason free pressure for no reason. There are times where you do have to run around, there's times where you have to stick to a gen or something like that. You just can't constantly crouch walk the entire time because you will never get anywhere. If you have to go rescue someone on a hook, you're probably going to have to run for it. If you got to get to a gen, you're probably going to have to run to it. There's just not a lot of good sense in the overall macro gameplay in crouch walking everywhere. I mean, there's a reason why people always run as Survivor. It's not 2016 anymore. However, I will say that it's really funny how 10 years ago, crouch walking was probably the effective strategy, aka just using stealth against any killer. And now here we are, it's actually an effective strategy again. Now, obviously using a perk like Urban Evasion is a little more helpful if you're going to constantly crouch walk around the map, but still, it doesn't remove the fact that crouch walking the entire game is not always the best strategy. The second issue I see with a lot of players is kind of related to the first one, and that's bad gen pressure. So I think constantly crouch walking is slowing down the game for a lot of players, and as a result, they're not really pressuring gens nearly as much. I think overall, unless you're on death hook or in some other precarious situation or position, it's so vital to be constantly pressuring gens and getting them done whenever possible. Whenever Jason is using Omnipresent Evil, I know it can be kind of uncertain, I guess, for lack of a better word, for, you know, what to do. Like, do you pressure a gen? Do you try and stealth it out and wait for him to get out of his power? Honestly, I think the best thing you can do is just have everybody split up and pressure gens. Don't try and double up a gen unless you absolutely have to, or if it just makes sense to. If there's a gen that's like almost done, go ahead, crank it out, get it done. But I just don't think it makes sense to just let the gen pressure fall off because you're too scared to hop on a gen. The third issue I'm seeing is, again, kind of related to my previous point, and that's just overall bad positioning and general lack of situational awareness. And what I mean by this is when facing Jason, there are some gens that are much safer than others. The safest gens are ones that don't have a window, pallet, or breakable wall right next to them. I'm thinking a lot of gens that are on hills and things like that, so you don't have to worry about Jason, you know, being right there. Obviously, he has a projectile, so you do have to look out for that. But the main thing is that there are some generators that are safer to, you know, sit at if he's in his Omnipresent Evil, because he can't immediately reach you. Now, there's some tiles and some spots where gens are just unfortunately very bad. And I'd definitely say it's the worst on indoor maps in particular. In fact, I think most matches when I lose against Jason, it's because it's an indoor map. Places like Hawkins and Giddy Meat Plant, for example, can be really bad when facing Jason because a lot of gens are kind of cornered or tucked away from like the main area of the map, and you don't really have another place to go to except for like one pallet. But that pallet is where Jason will teleport to, and he can, you know, corner you instantly. So you just have to be careful with where you position yourself. And again, I think it goes back to, unless you're death hook, try and pressure the gens that are the riskiest. If you're death hook, just go for the safest gens possible. Obviously, you have to watch out not 3-gen yourself in the process, but I think overall that gen positioning is so important. I think it's why people are losing a lot on these indoor maps, because nobody's really pressuring the gens that are the worst ones. Another thing about the general lack of awareness, and what I mean by that, is that there's some times where people just seem very oblivious to where Jason is. Like, if he's in his Omnipresent Evil mode, you can sometimes tell where he is because of the grass moving, or sometimes there's like a weird like sound effect. I don't know if that's a bug or not, but sometimes you can kind of hear like where he is if he's really like right next to you. and he's going to spawn in. So I think just being extra aware of like any pallet spawns, any windows, whatever it is, because he can spawn in at any of those places. So if you really pay attention, you can hear if he's going to be spawning right next to you, and you kind of get like a free half-second chance to like sprint away. So the fourth issue, and I believe the last one that I have written down here, is very short chases. And I alluded to this in my intro piece, but basically I have seen so many people die so quickly. I'm seeing people go down in literally 2 to 5 seconds. They're getting hit with a projectile and dying 2 seconds later. It's that bad. I'm not even joking or exaggerating. I've had so many games where people just drop like flies. Like, there's no way to get any kind of gen pressure or do anything, because when people are constantly going down and constantly needing to unhook and rescue and heal, there's just no way to get anything done in the match. From my observations, I think one reason why shorter chases are happening is because people are just doing a very bad job at looping him away from any hooks or scrap piles. Now, obviously, there's so many hooks and scrap piles that spawn, so it's impossible to totally avoid them, but there's certain tiles and places on a map where you can generally expect to see a hook or a scrap pile. If Jason needs to refill his projectile, he's probably going to do it whenever he can, and there's no cooldown or slowdown of any kind when he picks up his projectile from a hook or a scrap pile, so you have to keep moving at all costs or else you will die. And besides just avoiding any hooks or scrap piles when you're being chased, I think playing against the projectile like it's a huntress is the best way to approach a chase. The reason I say this is because Jason's projectile works pretty similarly to Huntress's hatchets, and there's even a sound effect when Jason is winding up his projectiles. So use that audio cue to your advantage. Jason is also pretty effective at zoning if you don't watch it, so you really need to keep moving at all costs. Sometimes the best play is to just leave the loop entirely, and you might catch him off guard and he won't even know where you went. One other thing about Jason's chasing ability is that he does get free haste after jump scaring, and it's actually one of my only complaints I have against Jason. I think it allows for some really easy basic attacks on especially shorter loops. So when it comes to his haste, I don't really have any tips or tricks personally. I just think the best thing to do is just make as much distance as you can, just be aware of your surroundings, and just try and leave a loop when it seems possible to do. But overall, I've had a lot of fun playing against Jason personally. My only real complaint, again, is the free haste, but I kind of understand why he gets that. I think Jason's pretty well designed, and he's really a nice combination of old DBD stuff with the modern DBD mechanics. If you have any tips or tricks when facing Jason that I didn't mention here in this video, feel free to leave them in the comments. But that's pretty much all I have for now, so thanks for watching.